I'm at Mem Sahib once again, my favorite Indian restaurant, really in the country. And I know that's saying a lot, but Ron Tooley here is, I think, one of the best chefs I've ever run into in terms of being able to spice the food and bring out flavors. Well, I have another ghost story I want to tell today. And this is another Zoe and Donna episode. And if you remember from my last story, Zoe has had quite a few paranormal experiences in life, seeing ghosts. And this is, I think, one of the most amazing stories I've ever heard. And it really freaked me out. Donna's relatives, her name is, of course these names aren't real, but their names are Stacy and Keith. And this takes place in Pasadena. They bought a late 1800, late 18th century brick colonial. And these things didn't have drywall, they had plaster on the walls. And so Keith was about doing a lot of work, doing some renovation, ripping out walls and ceilings and everything. And so this one particular day, he was, in that process, ripping out the wall in what would have been like the living room. And Stacy was in the garden, just planting and putting a little garden together. When all of a sudden she noticed, she just had this strange feeling behind her in the garden that someone was staring at her. And so she slowly turned around because it was just this omnipresent feeling, somebody is staring at me. So she turns around and she just froze because standing about 15, 20 feet away from her was the image of an older man wearing coveralls, and he had a beard, and his eyes were dark, and so the guy was standing there staring at her with this intense gaze, and then suddenly he reaches down and picks up a rock, and he takes the rock and he throws it at her. She ducked. She ducked, and the rock goes flying past her head into the house. And then you hear Keith inside going, "Hey, what happened? Who's done that?" And so then she looked around to see, make sure Keith was alright. When she turned back, the man walked towards her and walked right through her, and she just felt like this. Oh my God! Like some wet, dark thing had passed through her entire body. And Keith comes running out of the house, and he's like, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" And she's standing there shivering, and then proceeds to tell him what happened. So he says, "Well, come inside and look at this." Now, at that moment, Donna and Zoe were pulling up to their into the front of the house. They had like a circular driveway, and this is a 3-story home, and Zoe's looking up in the top window. And and she sees a woman wearing a white blouse with her hair in a bun on top of her head, and she's looking out the window with her arms crossed like this. And Zoe's like, "Mom, look at that woman up there." And Donna's like, "What woman?" She says, "The woman in the window." So she's got a white blouse on, man. She looks really mad. So they park the car, and Donna and Zoe get out of the car and they start approaching the building, and of course she sees Stacy, and they're still in a state of shock over what had just happened. And they're telling the story, and then Keith turns to that part of the wall where the rock had hit, and he's like, that sounded like it was hollow when that rock hit. And she said, "Really?" And so he starts digging into the plaster and pulling big chunks of plaster away from the wall. And all of a sudden, right where the rock had hit, this big piece falls out. And right behind it is a little space, like it was a shelf of some kind. And there was a bag, like a leather satchel that was now kind of deteriorating a little bit, but it was still kind of intact. And inside of the leather bag, you could see there were some photographs, and then around the leather bag was some jewelry, and so Keith pulls out the bag very carefully. He slides the photographs out of the bag, and then he starts to flip through the photographs. And just as the second photograph was the photograph of a man and a woman standing side by side, right out in front of their house. And Stacy goes, "Wait, that's the man. That's the man. That's the man who threw the rock." And Keith says, "What?" And then Zoe looks up and she says, "Mom, that's the woman. That's the woman who was looking at me from the window and she was really mad." Yeah.